Welcome! In this series of videos, we will cover the design and implementation of a project, from initial design through coding and development to testing, using the PowerBasic Windows compiler. Today we will look again at the design of alternative graphic user interfaces by adding pop-up menus. This was our application at the end of the last video. We have created a dialog on which we have a graphics control. This graphics control has a gradient fill employed upon it. Additionally, we have added 7 hexagonal buttons. Each of these buttons has 2 functions. If you left-click on a button, it will trigger an event. This event can be linked to another screen, another application, or any other piece of code you wish to put in your application. Additionally, we are tracking the position of the mouse on the graphics control. Should it hover over one of the buttons, then a small pop-up tooltip will appear, albeit briefly, and then it will disappear again. This allows the user to gain information as to what the function of the button actually is without having to click on it. What we're going to do today is we're going to add a pop-up menu to a couple of our buttons. So let's go and have a look at the code. We have a subclassed graphics procedure to handle the callback functions on our graphics control to pick up what's happening on our hexagonal buttons. This is called graphic_proc. If we have a look at that, we can see here is the code which triggers for the left mouse button. We already have a handle in here for the right mouse button coming up, and that's where we're going to put our new code. As we did for the left mouse button, we first need to pick up the location of the cursor. We can do that quite easily by using the getCursorPause API call. We're passing it a single parameter, which is pLocation. This is a point variable which will store both the X and the Y locations on the screen. This is exactly the same code as we used for the left mouse button. Next, we need to turn that X and Y location into a location on the graphics control. We can use another Windows API call, screen-to-client, to perform that function. This will populate both elements of this user-defined type, pLocation, the X and the Y coordinates. As we did with the left mouse button, we need to determine which hex we're currently hovering over. And we already have a function which will return that information. That's the getHex function. This takes 3 parameters, the X and the Y coordinates, which we've just obtained, and a global variable called short_distance. This is to ensure that we correctly determine which hexagonal button the user has clicked on. The code in this event will only trigger when the right mouse button is released. So this will work quite independently of the event for the left mouse button. So having determined the hexagonal button that the user has clicked on, we next need to call something to produce our pop-up menu. So we're going to create a new function called buildMenu. And we're only going to call it for 2 of the buttons. As you can see from the code above for the handling of the left mouse button, there are a number of hexagonal buttons we can trigger on. There's one called Menu App. There's also one called Report App. So we're going to trigger our right mouse button just on those 2 buttons alone. So we can do that by testing the value in our hex variable. And we'll do this using a select case statement. We're testing the value of the hex variable, and if it's either the Menu App constant or the Report App constant, we know that the user has right-clicked on those 2 buttons. So there is our call to the new function we're about to create, buildMenu, taking 3 parameters. First of all, the hex we have clicked on, and the X and the Y coordinates. So let's now go and create this new function. So here is the skeleton of our new function taking in its 3 parameters. As we've passed in the variable hex, we know which of the hexagonal buttons the user has actually clicked on. This will be a value between the value 1 and the value 7. I'm going to use another select case statement in here so that we can handle each of these buttons separately. So there are the case statements, one for menu app and one for report app. There are two additional pieces of information we'll need to keep track of: the handle of the pop-up menu and the value that the user has picked, if any, from the menu that appears. So let's create a couple of local variables to hold that information. So there we have a handle for pop-up and a value for the menu picked. Now we can create our menu pop-up. Firstly, we use the menu new pop-up command. This instructs PowerBasic that we're about to create a new pop-up, and it will populate the pop-up variable with the handle of that pop-up. Next, we can add a menu add string command for each of the pop-up values we wish to appear on this pop-up. So the first one we're going to call menu A. This is the text the user will get to see, and the value following it is value 1, so that's the first button. The second one is menu B, and it's shown as value number 2. This number 1 and number 2 will be the values that are returned by the next command when the user actually clicks on it. Finally, we use the menu context command. This takes a number of parameters. Firstly, the handle of the pop-up, the X and Y locations on screen that you wish the pop-up to appear, and a flag and a value going to the menu picked. If we have a look at the flags available on menu context, we're using the TPM left button. So this is tracking the clicking of the left mouse button on the menu item. There are a number of other options you can actually use, which can be accumulated together to give different functionality. So let's try running the application now to see how it appears. And there is our dialog with our hexagonal buttons. If we hover over the menu one and right-click, we're getting a menu appearing on screen. However, it's appearing at the top left-hand corner. It would be much better if it appeared down where the user was over the button. So let's exit from the application and make that change. If we go back to the code where the right mouse button is initially clicked, this command here gets the current location on screen. We're then converting that to the location on the graphics control. So we want to store the current screen location. We can do that quite easily by populating an X and Y variable from our pLocation point variable. This can then be passed straight in to our build menu. So if we try running the application once more, and if we right-click on the menu button, the pop-up menu appears with menu A and menu B. And it's not appearing for any other button. So our code is working perfectly. If we bring the screen down so it's not maximized to ensure when we right-click, the menu is still appearing in the correct location on screen. So let's put more code in for the other button. So we're handling the menu app. We also want to handle the report app. So we want to put the same kind of code in for that. And there is our code for the report app hexagonal button. We're still using the menu new pop-up option, populating the pop-up variable and giving a value for, in this case, the 2 entries we want on the list. We can, of course, add a third option, just to differentiate it between the first one. And again, we're using menu context to populate the menu picked when the user clicks on it with the left mouse button. So just to be sure we're picking up that value, let's put a little message box in to pop up to tell us the number of the menu that's been picked. If the user does not pick any of the suggested menu options, the value in menu picked will be 0. So we can test to see if the value is greater than 0 and display a message box on the screen to tell us what the number picked was. If we run our application now and click on menu, we're getting menu A and B. If we look for the report application, right-click on it, and we're getting 3 options: report A, B, and C. If we click on report C, it will give us the value picked equals 3. If we do it on the menu and click the first one, it will give you the value picked is 1. so we can determine very easily which of the menu options the user has actually picked by its ordinal code. And if we take it down from full screen just to make sure it's still appearing, there are our values quite happily appearing when the user right-clicks on them. And we can still click on the Exit Application button to exit the app. So in summary, what we've achieved today is we've added a floating context menu to 2 of our hexagonal buttons, which are triggered when the user right-clicks on one of those 2 hexagonal buttons. This allows us to create different context menus depending on what the user has actually clicked on, without having to clutter up the main screen with a formal menu. Hopefully you'll find this code useful in your applications, but that's it for today. Thank you for watching.